Excellent. Hi. So I'm here to talk about the history of Jaws, film that came out in 1975. I'm going to go back to early days too. We're going to talk about the book and some stuff that happened afterwards. I will give you a couple more minutes. Let's talk about other things that happened in 1975. Me. I happened in 1975. Salem's Lot, I guess, Stephen King. Born to Run, 50. What else happened in Rocky Horror Picture Show? A lot of stuff happened in 1975. How's everybody doing today? Good day?
So sorry.
Huh?
I'll introduce you, Kevin.
You will? Oh, I'm going to be introduced. This is exciting.
I know. Big doings here in Walpole.
Really? I love
right. When you're famous like Kevin, you get introduced. Before I introduce Kevin officially, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank our sponsors today for refreshments, Charter Senior Living in Dedham, and there's some flyers over there about their grand opening as well. Now, drum roll, please. We have, thank you, Kevin Quigley, who is, I think by trade, a graphic designer. Am I correct? And I'm going to call you a pop culture guru. Yes, and he's here to talk about the 50th anniversary of Jaws. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Now I'm officially introduced. So Jaws is interesting. So it starts off, as most movies do, starts off with a writer. Peter Benchley, who we have an amazing signed letter here. This is fantastic. So he's a freelance writer in the late 60s, early 70s. He was a political speechwriter and wrote a lot of articles. And he started getting into the idea of sharks. And how did he get there? Well, there's this guy named Frank Mundus, who and this is referenced in the letter as well. He at one point he was a fisherman in Long Island and caught a 4,500-pound shark. That was menacing Long Island. And so there's an article written about it, and Peter Benchley read the article, and he's like, that's really interesting. And Frank Mundus was sort of known as the Monster Man. Later on in life, he actually had shirts made and stuff. And he caught a lot of sharks. In 1916, I believe, there were also a bunch of shark attacks in Long Island. So Long Island was a very big shark thing, and Peter Benchley's obsessed with sharks. So he's reading all about this, and he starts getting some ideas, but nothing's really coalescing right away. So in the 70s, so I'm a writer too, I'm a novelist, and it was a lot easier to get books published in the 70s. So he's at his editor's office at Doubleday, this guy named Thomas Congdon, and he's just throwing out ideas trying to get a book published. And he's like, how about this nonfiction book? How about this political book? And Congdon's like, no, he's not even paying attention to him. And he's like, well, how about a story about a shark that attacks people and what would happen if it came in and wouldn't go away? And Thomas Congdon's like, yes, that is great. I will write you a check for that. So he writes him $100 check, like an advance, and says, "You write the first few chapters, and we'll get you more money." And literally, he's just So what Peter Benchley does? Peter Benchley, he writes articles. He doesn't really write books. So he goes into heavy research mode. So he reads books like Blue Meridian and Jacques Cousteau, The Shark, Splendid Savage of the Sea, Shadows in the Sea, Sharks and Shark Attacks. And then he saw this documentary called Man-Eater, Blue Water, White Death. And Benchley gets so into research, he forgets to write a book. So he's just researching. And Thomas Congdon's like, where's the book? And he's like, I'm researching. And Doubleday's eventually like, we're going to make you give that $100 back, and we're not going to pay you at all for this. You're going to be off this project. And so Peter Benchley's like, okay, I'll write the shark book. And he writes it, and he brings it to Congdon, and the first couple chapters are fine, and then it turns into a comedy for some reason. And Congdon's like, please no, this needs to be menacing. So he goes back and writes it, and he writes lines like, and then the black, fathomless eyes seemingly riveted upon him, the gills rippled, bloodless wounds in the steely skin. Real scary. So Congdon's like, yes, that's what we want. So they're Doubleday accepts it. They like it. They're trying to figure out titles. So they're at lunch, and they're like, okay, what should we call this? Silent Fall? That doesn't work. The Stillness in the Water? It's kind of cool, but not really right for this. Leviathan Rising. Nobody knew what a Leviathan was. So no, that's not going to work. The Summer of the Shark, which sounds kind of like a teen comedy. Hey, it's the Summer of the Shark. And then Benchley says, hey, why don't we call it the Jaws of Death? And Congdon's like, get rid of those extraneous words. Let's just call it Jaws. So there we go. And then they're coming up with covers. Now, this is interesting. In the 70s, they had this whole motif of like a black background with like something in the center, and then you could see a little town in the middle of it. Everything was menacing the suburbs in the 70s. But nobody knew what like a shark's mandibles looked like back then. So they said, we're not going to go with that. Then this is the one from England, and I kind of like this one because you see the whole shark, but it didn't really take off in America. They didn't want to do that. And eventually, they came up with this idea. Now, this is cool. This is what the hardcover looked like, and the whole abyss thing, like the black void, and then the sharks coming, and the swimmer. Like it's a very evocative thing. So they're like, this is what we're going to use for the cover. So that's all set. Everything's all set. The only thing now is that they have a hardcover idea, but they don't have anything for paperback. So Ballantine Books, the readers of Ballantine Books, who were a paperback publisher, they read the book early and they're like, "This is great. We want to do this. We're gonna pay you for the paperback rights. This $575,000, which is $3 million today." So Peter Benchley had, when he was pitching ideas, had $65 in his bank account, and now he has $3 million, which is great. They're like, but we like the cover. The cover's cool, but it's called Jaws. You don't really see the jaws. We're going to change the cover. And this is what they changed the cover to. So, yeah, very cool. So this is a woman named Helen Gurley Brown. In the 70s, she owned and ran a magazine called Cosmopolitan. And they had a literature section. So the person in the literature section, she read the book and said, this is really good. It would make a great movie. And she also talked about the paperback deal. And so people are excited about this. Well, Helen Gurley Brown's husband is a man named David Brown. And David Brown is a movie producer. And his partner, Dick Zanuck, and they loved movies, so they read the book and they're like, we want to do Jaws. So this is like this whole thing. Everybody lived in California. It was great. So they were known recently for The Sting. The Sting, very popular movie, won Best Picture. Everybody liked it. But before The Sting, they were known for B horror movies, including a movie called It literally says, don't say it, hiss it. So it's literally called it's about a woman who turns into a snake. It's bad. Don't watch it. But so they're sort of at the crux of genre movie and like quality movie, art movie. And this is what's happening in the 70s. This is sort of and we'll get more into it a little bit later, but movies that seem like just horror movies or genre movies that become kind of artsy. So they realize that they need a director, a young director who has made one movie, and they of course get this guy, Dick Richards. Who's Dick Richards? No one knows, no one cares. Here's why we don't care about Dick Richards. So they bring him into the first, they hire him. They're like, you're going to be he made one movie that didn't really do very well. They produced it. And they bring him in. They're like, we love you. You're going to be in the movie. They hire him. And he's like, yeah, okay. So this movie, so the whale's going to come in. And they're like, no, it's a shark movie. It's about sharks. And he's like, yeah. So anyway, so this whale, and they're like, no, it is a book. It's called Jaws. It's about sharks. And he's like, yeah, great. So then the whale attacks the boat. And they're like, no, it is about sharks. And they fire him. And that's when this guy comes into the picture, Steven Spielberg. So cool. So he is in their office and he's looking at manuscripts lying around. He had made one movie. We'll get to it. He's manuscripts lying around. He sees one called Jaws. He thinks it's about a dentist. Which is great. Marathon Man had just come out. Dentistry was on the mind. So he takes it home, reads it, loves it. He's like, I want to direct this. Now so let's talk a little bit about Steven Spielberg. A lot of his friends, like George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola, had gone to all these prestigious film schools and, were coming up at the time. He flunked out of all those film schools. When he was younger, when he was a teenager, he did a tour on the Universal Studios lot and then snuck into an office and pretended to be an intern for weeks before anybody caught him. So he was sort of coming up. At 21, Rod Serling hires him. Rod Serling had done The Twilight Zone, and he was doing a new series called Night Gallery. And he was in the first episode was going to have an actress you might have heard of named Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford, who famously hates every director and is very difficult to work with. So you get this 21-year-old director, Steven Spielberg, to come in and direct the first episode of a new series. Guess what? They loved each other. She thought he was great. He thought she was awesome. He, even at 21, becomes known as an actor's director. They had a great time. Show was pretty good, too. His second big picture was a movie called Duel. This was on TV in the 70s. And you'll notice that it is a large, menacing truck chasing after a helpless car through the desert. So, we've got some idea about what's coming next. His first big movie, his first theatrical, this wasn't a theatrical movie, it was on TV, but it was so good that they showed it in Europe in the movie theaters. So cool. And then his first big movie is a movie called The Sugarland Express. Pretty good movie, a road movie with Goldie Hawn. It's just about, it's almost like Bonnie and Clyde light. They're sort of bank robbers that sort of are on the run from the law. It's a deep picture. But Zanuck and Brown produced it, and they liked it, and so they're like, yeah, we'll bring the Spielberg guy in. And so the thing is that Spielberg, he's like, yeah, I have all these ideas. I'm going to film on the ocean. I'm going to do this. Nobody had ever filmed on the ocean. This is why they wanted a young director. They wanted somebody with all these new ideas. And then he realized he got cold feet after he got hired. He's like, I don't want to do this. I want to work on this other film that also was going to film on the ocean. And they're like, you have a contract. You signed this. And they're like, okay, I guess I'll do this Jaws movie. He said, I don't want to be known as the truck shark guy. I don't know if that's a type of guy that people are known as, but yeah. So Peter Benchley comes back in, and in the contract, he made a lot of money from this. In the contract, he was supposed to write 2 drafts of the screenplay. So he writes 2 drafts, and Spielberg is like, I like this, but I like the last third of what you're doing. I like the last third of the book, and I like the last third of your scripts. I like the stuff on the ocean. I don't like really anything to do with the land. Other thing that Doubleday did was they made him put in a subplot. He's like, these two, the Chief Brody and his wife are too happy. You need to have one of them having an affair. It's the 70s. So Benchley writes the least sexy, least convincing affair that you've ever read in a book. It's Ellen Brody and Matt Hooper, who in the book looks like Robert Redford, in the movie looks like Richard Dreyfuss. But very unconvincing. So Spielberg's like, we're going to cut that out. We're also going to cut out a subplot about the mayor owning money to the mob. It just didn't make any sense. It's an okay book. So he's like, this is where my talent ends. I can't do what you want me to do. So Spielberg brings in this playwright named Howard Sackler, who wrote The Great White Hope. It was a big play. He's huge on Broadway, won the Pulitzer for playwright. And so he excises, he does everything that Steven Spielberg wants, takes out a lot of the land stuff, makes everything going towards the ocean stuff at the end. What I find funny is that Howard Sackler wrote The Great White Hope, and then he wrote The Great White Shark. That's funny to only me, okay. So it's a good script. And he's, Howard Sackler is a very good playwright, but Spielberg's like, there's not a whole lot of humor in this. There's not a whole lot of humanity in this. So he brings in this guy, Carl Gottlieb. Now, Carl Gottlieb is mainly an actor, but he also writes. And he brought him in to play the role of the newspaper editor in Jaws, in the movie Jaws. But he's also a writer, so he's there on set all the time. So he's sort of known for The Odd Couple. He's like writing scripts for The Odd Couple. So he's like, hey, while you're here acting as this guy, why don't you, every night he brings him some of the, he's like, hey, what could you do to make these pages better? And every single night, Carl Gottlieb is editing the screenplay and making like funny jokes and making interpersonal stuff that wasn't in the original script. So he's also a screenwriter on this, because every single day he's like changing. You think that Jaws had this big like master plan and everything was on the fly. Very interesting. So they're casting. So they want Chief Brody. So Chief Brody, first they think of Robert Duvall, who was recently in The Godfather Part 2. Steven Spielberg loved him. He's like, we want you to be Chief Brody. He reads the script. He's like, I love this script, but I don't want to be Chief Brody. I want to be Quint, the alcoholic fisherman. He's like, that's a role for me. And Spielberg's like, I don't see you as that. So he says no. Then they thought of Charlton Heston. Charlton Heston, big roles. Ben-Hur. He's a good actor. But he had recently been in Earthquake. He had been in Airport 75, and he had been in Skyjacked. He basically punches his way out of every natural disaster he's in, and they didn't think that he would be believable as a chief who was afraid of the water and who couldn't immediately kill the shark. So they're like, no. So then they bring in Roy Scheider. Now, Roy Scheider is at a party, and Spielberg's like, I'm trying to cast this movie, Jaws. He's telling some friends, he's like, there's a scene where the shark jumps up on a boat, and then the chief is there, and he's trying to kick him, but it's not working. And Roy Scheider's there, and he's like, hey, that sounds cool. Can I do that? And Spielberg's like, I just saw The French Connection. You're a real tough guy. You can't really be a tough guy in this. And he's like, give me a chance. And so they read for it. And it worked out. Roy Scheider is one of these actors. He's like a character actor who plays leads, and he has to fight for every single one of his roles. He was later in All That Jazz and had to fight for that one too, and he's perfect in it. He's great. 9 days before production, they still hadn't cast the other two leads. Matt Hooper, the ichthyologist, and Quint, the alcoholic fisherman that I mentioned. So who's going to play these guys? Well, as I said, Matt Hooper looked like Robert Redford in the book. So let's run through some 70s guys. We got John Voight, who was recently in Deliverance. Really cool mustache. Very believable, but he didn't want it. Timothy Bottoms. 70s mustache, sure. Didn't want it. He was a sensitive guy, didn't want it. Jean-Michael Vincent, who looked the part but might not be a good actor. So they said no to him. And then Joel Grey, who was recently in Cabaret. I think he could have done it, but I don't know why he turned it down. So Spielberg is really good friends with this guy, George Lucas, who had recently done American Graffiti. And George Lucas said, hey, I got this guy, Richard Dreyfuss, who was in my movie, American Graffiti. He's great. And Spielberg approaches him, and Richard Dreyfuss is a very interesting character. So at first, he's like, I don't want to be in a shark movie. That's exactly what he sounds like in real life. I've met him. He's like, I don't want to be in a shark movie. I'm in this movie called The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, and I'm filming this now, and I'm going to be a big star. I don't need to be in this horror movie. And then he sees the movie, and he's like, oh, I'm terrible in this movie. No one's going to want to hire me after this. So he says immediately, yes, I'll do the shark movie. I'll do anything. So that's how they get Matt Hooper. He looks 46 in this picture. He is 26 in this picture. He's very, very young. And then we come to Quint. So this guy, Sterling Hayden, had been known as a seafaring actor. He'd been in all these, like Captain's Courageous and A Mutiny on the Bounty, and he had been in all these movies in the 50s and 60s, or actually 40s and 50s, and Spielberg wanted him so bad for this. But he owed so much money to the U.S. government, to the IRS, that he couldn't actually work as an actor in America, or else all of his money would go away. He could work as a screenwriter, but not as an actor. So he's like, oh, okay, well, that won't work. Let's go to this guy, Robert Shaw, who was in The Sting, and everybody loved him. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'd love to be in your movie. Here's the problem. I own a lot of money to the U.S. government. It's like, why are you people like this? So, yeah, he owed so much money to the IRS for back taxes. He was an Irish actor. So how it worked out with him was he could work a certain amount of days, and then he would have to start paying his money. So what they would do on the set was, like, he would do his lines, and then they would fly him to Canada for a couple days, and then back down for more lines, so he didn't have to pay. Also, the movie was supposed to run like a 55-day production. One, regular movies run 90 days. Two, as I said, this is filming on the ocean. This is the first movie to do that, and there was no way this movie was going to be made in 55 days. But Spielberg's like, sure, 55, that sounds great. not knowing anything. So they're scouting out places to film Jaws. Now, they originally go to Long Island because that's where all the real shark stuff happened, but they decided to stick with Martha's Vineyard. And why? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, it's picturesque. Two, if you get further away from the shore, it looks like you're in the middle of the ocean. And three, this is a very unique thing to Martha's Vineyard. If you're 12 miles out, the bottom of the ocean is only 35 feet deep, so they can put all the rigging and all the stuff that they need down there and easily get to it. So it was a perfect location, except for how it was the worst possible location. They start filming in the summer of '74 when the tourists are at Martha's Vineyard. So this is one of the rare shots where you don't see sailboats or jet skis in the background. And they kept filming in the fall and the winter when it got super cold. So, New England winter and tourists, they had to contend with the entire time they were doing this. Then they're like, how do we get a great white shark to act? Well, first they thought, let's train it. Let's train a shark. You can't, that shark's brain is this big. It's not a mammal. It's just hilarious. And then Spielberg said, well, I had seen this movie, The Incredible Mr. Limpet, where they had like cartoon, fish. So why don't we do a cartoon shark instead and animate that shark? That's not a good idea. So what he does is he goes to this guy named Bob Matty. Now, Bob Matty worked with Walt Disney on the Jungle Cruise ride. He is known for this guy who can do animatronics, like robots that look like animals that can go underwater. So he did like the hippos for the Jungle Cruise, and they're still there, so they can last underwater. And he did the giant squid from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So he's known as the guy that can do animatronic animals that can hold up in water. So he makes some sharks, and here's what they look like. So, they very realistic, giant 25-foot sharks. They're on these like pulleys and stuff, and really would work very well if it wasn't for the fact that they were made for fresh water. So this is what it looks like, by the way. This is so there's a barge here for special effects. The camera people are here. There's like there's cameramen underwater, a frogman. There's a big trolley, and this is what. So it all should have worked. By the way, this special effects barge and this camera barge are really small, and a joke started happening around the set. We can't fit as many people as we need on here. You're going to need a bigger boat. It was just a joke around the set, and then Roy Scheider at one point said it in the movie, and it stayed in. So that's the origin of that. But so what happens with sharks underwater in salt water is that electrolysis happens. The gears start getting oversalted. The skin on here starts like breaking up. So they have to get like people to touch up the shark's makeup every day. And so they can't, one, it's breaking, two, it looks bad, so they can't actually use these animatronic sharks as much as they want to. That will work in film's favor. So this is what it looked like inside, by the way. It's really cool. It's very very sophisticated and full of salt water. So I think a lot of people know that the sharks got the nickname Bruce. So all the animatronic sharks, Spielberg started calling it Bruce after his lawyer. And the lawyer's like, it's a shark named after me? Okay. But I don't know if you know about another shark in the film named Oscar. Now, they, that scene in the movie where there's the tiger shark hanging up and people are looking at it? That is a real shark. They couldn't spare any special effects people to work on that shark. So Spielberg said, hey, Martha's Vineyard people, could you catch me a tiger shark? And they're like, sure, we could do that. We're fishermen. We could do this. 5 days before production, they didn't have it. 5 days before this scene was being filmed, they didn't have it. So the Martha's Vineyard guys were like, yeah, we can't do it. So Spielberg enlists the help of Fred Zendar, who was a stuntman who was working unofficially on this film. He was known as the Ancient Mariner because he had been working for like 50 years on films and only on like sea pictures. And this producer, Teddy Grossman. And so he's like, can you go down to Florida and ask them if they could get me a tiger shark? And they're like, yeah, sure. Like it's normal because it's the 70s. So they get some guys and they're like, hey, can you get us a tiger shark? They said yes. They get them a tiger shark, a big shark, and then they're like, okay, first they withhold, and they're like, can you pay us more money? And Jaws is running out of money so fast, and they're like, we can't give you any more money because then we can't afford to get back home. So eventually they get their money, they haggle it out, and then they put this tiger shark in a giant coffin with ice on it. It's a shark box, and they're alarmed that they can't bring it on a commercial flight. Like, what do you mean, TWA? Why can't I put my shark box on your flight? It's like, no. So they had to get like a special, they had to like charter a flight. They get it back. And I don't know if you know, but sharks are made of cartilage inside, not bone. They rot real fast. So they finally get it back to Martha's Vineyard, put it up. They put the arrows in it. And it is smelling really bad. And they filmed this thing for 4 days in the hot Martha's Vineyard sun. So they had to put makeup on this dead shark, like for days. Richard Dreyfuss was like, I can't do it. Like, no, you have to act with it. It's so gross. So that's the story of, that's a real shark when you see the movie. So let's tell more stories about real sharks. So Richard Dreyfuss, there's a scene in the movie where Dreyfuss goes down in a cage, and you see sharks, and So what happened was Spielberg also had a secondary unit in Australia to film actual sharks, not to interact with them, not to train them, but to interact with them. So in Australia, they had this tiny shark, this tiny cage, and a very small actor, not a little person, but a small actor, so that the sharks, which weren't great whites, but they looked a lot bigger based on this, so they could like studio trickery. But the guy at the last minute said, "I don't want to do this because I don't want to be eaten by sharks." So they had the cage in the water. They had the cameras rolling, and then a shark comes up to the cage and gets tangled in the ropes on top of the cage and starts thrashing everywhere. And the cage is empty at this point. And so they send the footage back to Spielberg, and he's like, I love this footage, but there's nobody in the cage. Fun fact, Richard Dreyfuss's character, Matt Hooper, was supposed to die in the movie, and because they got this footage, they have him escape so that you could see that empty cage. So that's why Richard Dreyfuss is alive at the end of the movie, and he kind of like hides behind some rocks for a while. That's why. Written on the fly. This is I just like this ad that they did, but. You'll notice that Roy Scheider's in the back looking a little alarmed because Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss, they hated each other. They hated each other so much. They did not get along. There are a couple of thoughts as to why they didn't get along. One, Robert Shaw was a playwright, and he was sort of writing some of his own lines at the time, and he was method. So he came into set thinking, well, if my character hates this character, then I'm going to hate him and like treat him like crap. Richard Dreyfuss, by the way, The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz had come out, and he was getting rave reviews. So he's walking around set like, I'm great, I'm the best actor here, and sort of being a jerk about everything. And he doesn't stop being a jerk for the rest of his life. I met him in a bookstore once, and he was really mean to me. Very brief story. At the bookstore, we were supposed to, because we were in like Boston, and we were supposed to, anytime a celebrity came in, we were supposed to treat them like a regular person. So we weren't supposed to recognize them and make a big deal of it. And he got so mad that I didn't recognize him, and he yelled at me. Not Richard Dreyfuss. And he threw his card at me. It was weird. Anyway, so Richard Dreyfuss. So they hated each other a lot, and they fought all the time. And also, Robert Shaw was such an alcoholic. He was drinking all the time. There was only one day he didn't show up drunk to work, and we'll get to that. But yeah, this feud has become like such legend. And Richard Dreyfuss nowadays said, no, here's him drinking. That's real beer. And so Richard Dreyfuss has later on said, oh, yeah, we didn't fight at all. That was all made up in the press. It was not. Multiple people have corroborated the story that they had a fight, had multiple fights. So this is him with like a wax figure at Madame Tussauds of Robert Shaw. Say, hey, look, we're fine now that he's dead. So while the movie's being filmed, the book comes out. Now, I don't know how many of you ever subscribed to the Book of the Month Club, but it was a big deal. It kind of ruled publishing back in the 70s and early 80s. And the whole gist of it is that, you belong to the Book of the Month Club, and once a month they would send you a new novel or a new hardcover, and you would read it. And if you didn't want it, you had to have to call them or write to them and say, I don't want the new book. But a lot of people just didn't do that. So what would happen is Jaws became a Book of the Month Club main selection. And so people, even if they didn't want the book, were getting the book. And then what would happen is people would say, hey, I didn't want this, but I'll read it anyway. It's here on my shelf, and then love it, and then tell everybody about it, and it became a word of mouth hit. Another thing that happened is that on the day it came out, Spielberg and his two producers were in California, and they each bought 100 copies of the book. So for one day, Jaws was the most popular book in California. And people saw that and like, oh, what is this book? And it just took off. There were also a lot of advertisements for it. This didn't happen with books a whole lot. And so Jaws, for the summer of '74, was the number two bestseller throughout the year. It kept being knocked down by Watership Down. Does everyone remember Watership Down? About the rabbits? Those rabbits kept that shark down. And then Burr by Gore Vidal sometimes jumped up and down. But yeah, this is just neat to see this. So yeah, Jaws was number 2 for the year, and was just like this phenomenon. So as I said, it was supposed to go for 55 days, the production. It went for 159 days. Spielberg was not happy with himself. He's like, they're going to fire me. Universal's going to hate me. No one will ever work with me again. So just keep that in mind. A couple things about the boat. So the Orca is the ship that they use in the movie. The Orca is the only sea creature that sharks are afraid of because it kills. That's why they're called killer whales. So there were 2 versions: the Orca 1 and the Orca 2. The 1 is an actual ship that they went on, and there's barrels and everything. And the second one has no bottom. It's just empty at the bottom, just had barrels, so they could sink this thing 50 times a day, and it would be fine. And one time they did that when Roy Scheider was trapped inside. He's like, what's happening? Why is this he just went over there to act in it, and they didn't know he was in there. He's very tall. How do you not know? But so he got out. He's fine. He did all that jazz later. But they would sink this over and over. So an interesting story about this is that after the production of the movie, a local at Martha's Vineyard said, hey, can I have that? And he said, sure. He wanted to make a shack out of it. Later on, and just had it at his house for like weeks, and they didn't do anything. And then the movie came out, and then people started going to his house and taking bits of the boat as a souvenir. And then they would take his other boat because they thought it must have been in the movie, and it's right next to it. So it was like stripped, within weeks of the movie coming out. What happened to the Orca 1? It lasted for a lot longer, but it also had a kind of a sad fate that we'll get to in a minute. So Spielberg, like I said, he's a young director. He's new at this, and that thing where they clap and they say this scene. He wasn't doing a whole lot of that. Plus, he was filming on the ocean. Filming was a little chaotic, so he kind of doesn't know what to. He just films everything and then throws it at his editor. His editor is a woman named Verna Fields, and she. Kind of well known in the industry, but not hugely known. She takes what he's doing and says, hey, the shark looks really fake in the scene. So I'm going to cut from the moment where it looks sort of real and then cut it right there. And then I'm going to cut around all the night stuff so you only see the fin, and kind of heightens the suspense of this. So you don't really see the full shark until near the end. That's all due to her. She is known in the business as Mother Cutter. She's great. So she's awesome. So she is basically the reason why Jaws looks as good as it does, and is as coherent as it is. We also want to talk about John Williams. John Williams is a great composer. He had won, looking like Charles Manson, he had won an Oscar for Fiddler on the Roof already, and he had worked with Spielberg on Sugarland Express. And Spielberg is like, hey, can you do my new movie? And so John Williams says, yeah, I'll go through this. And he does that, dun it. And he brings it to Spielberg, and he's like, oh, I hate that. I don't want that. I thought you were going to do something orchestral, something a little bit more serious. And John Williams says, the sophisticated approach you would like me to take isn't the approach that you took with the film I just experienced. So Spielberg's like, all right, you'll do the dun. That's fine. It's fine. So a couple things about the 70s and the late 60s, early 70s. Summer movies weren't as big a thing. A lot of theaters weren't air conditioned, so they shut down in the summer. That started to change, and people were actually advertising air conditioning in theaters just to bring people in the summer. So slowly but surely, this is happening. Bonnie and Clyde was a summer movie. It was a big hit. Easy Rider. American Graffiti, the George Lucas film. So these have become summer films. They're very popular, but they're not like blockbusters. They are because what's happening in movies, most movies, is that they open in small, like regional places, and then start building and becoming bigger over time. No film had really been released everywhere all at once, and that's the approach that they want to take with Jaws. They also want to advertise Jaws. So 3 days before the movie comes out, you would see a 30-second snippet of Jaws on your TV everywhere. It was on every station that you could watch. At this point, you could watch 3 stations. So Jaws comes out, released everywhere, and it is such a monumental blockbuster. There's lines down the block. They start keeping movie theaters open till 4 a.m. So that they can accommodate the number of people seeing Jaws. It is everywhere. Nobody wants to do anything else in the summer of '75. Except unless you're Brenda and Eddie and get married, then see this movie. It is just, it's packed, it's mobbed. Nobody anticipated this movie being this big. And so, they have a lot of articles. I love going through old articles, contemporary articles. Jaws scares audiences as few thrillers have. Talk about the Jaws phenomenon. 50 million in 24 days. And 50 million now, 500, I can't do the math, but anyway, that's almost $1 billion, I think. 24 days. And but the thing is, it was a blockbuster, which had never happened in the summer before, but it was also a critical hit. Classic in the making. People were talking about Spielberg's a genius. This is a genre, this is a thriller that has been elevated to art. And almost everybody agreed. Almost everybody. Not the New York Times. The New York Times, is this $8 million worth of shoddy exploitation? I love Jaws illustrates the decline in movie storytelling, and then we got, maybe I'm making too much of a sleazy horror movie, but I am concerned about the effect of this film on other films. Well, he might have had a point there. Without Jaws, you don't have Star Wars being a big blockbuster. You don't have the Jurassic Park. You don't have the Marvel movies. Jaws is the beginning of the summer blockbuster, basically invented a genre. It also invented merchandising. Toys everywhere. You get Jaws pins. You could get floaty toys. You could get this this shark in a box thing. And then you could get the Jaws game, the exciting action game. This movie is rated PG. It should have been rated R. It's safe for toddlers to play with, I guess, even though they're tiny, tiny little parts. That little girl's going to choke. Dick Zanuck was very happy about everything that's happening. The producers were like, oh, yeah, we're going to work with you. You are going to be this guy. So this is one of the few sad things about Steven Spielberg. So when the Oscars were being announced, he was very sure that he was going to get nominated for Best Director. So sure that he decided to do a live broadcast on television showing the announcements and him being there with his buddies. So, they're announcing the best directors on this thing. And we got Fellini for AmeriCorps. We've got Stanley Kubrick for Barry Lyndon, Sidney Lumet for Dog Day Afternoon, and Robert Altman for Nashville. And then, of course, we get the director for it's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Milos Forman. It's not Steven Spielberg at all. By the way, this is the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975. It's one of the very few movies ever to hit the top 5 awards. It won for movie, director, actor, actress, and screenplay. Nothing was going to beat it. I want to show you Steven Spielberg's face when he realized he was not getting nominated. Oh, no. Oh, Steven Spielberg. It's fine. You're going to win later. Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan are right around the corner. So at the Academy Awards, Jaws is nominated for Best Picture along with Barry Lyndon, Nashville, Cuckoo's Nest, and Dog Day Afternoon. It wins Best Sound, presented by Roy Scheider. That's kind of fun. And Muriel Hemingway. It wins for, of course, Best Score, John Williams. And then the mother cutter herself, Verna Fields. She wins for Best Editing, obviously. It was Steven Spielberg. And to Spielberg's credit, every time he's on a talk show, he's like, Verna Fields is the reason why this is a good movie. And he talks her up so much that she becomes one of the very first women executives at a movie theater. She just rises in the ranks, and she's great at it. She's fantastic. Jaws, however, does not win. As I said, Cuckoo's Nest wins everything. So very briefly, I talked about the Universal Studios tour. For a while, since it started in the 30s, they would go through like generic movie scenes. This is the parting of the Red Sea. These trams would go through, and you would watch the Red Sea part. But it was like just generic. They weren't tied to any actual movies. And when Jaws came, Universal was like, let's add a shark thing. Let's add actual Jaws. So first, they bring in this monstrosity. It is the fakest looking shark. Hi, I'm a shark. With these carrots that are painted white, I guess. I don't know. They got better at it. They fixed it. These are known as glamour trams, by the way. I just love that. So the shark is attacking, and it got better over the years, and it became like a big thing on the tour. What was also happening on the tour is this boat, the Orca, this prop that's used on the tour, is the actual boat used in the movie. So they just brought it over and just left it there to rot in the sun and the water. And then one day they're like, oh, it's rotted so much. They broke it up and made it into firewood. Steven Spielberg was so mad. He had no idea that they were using it. So in 1987 is when they got rid of it. So Universal Studios were coming to Florida. They said, hey, Jaws works so well as a part of the tram tour. Let's make it its own ride. That's an exaggeration. But it really jumps out at you, and it looks like you're on a boat. It's a whole thing. It's a lot scarier. I wrote it. It was great. It's not there anymore. This is what it looked like inside. It was like in a pit. A couple people fell into that pit, but nobody was actually seriously hurt. So very popular. Let's talk briefly about the sequels. Jaws 2 is fine. It's a retread of the movie. Jaws 3D is so bad. This is an actual scene from Jaws 3D. So here's the background, and here is the 3D shark that they used. And I illustrated this. It breaks through the glass into here to eat people on land. It is ridiculous. And it comes right in your face. And then Jaws 4, The Revenge. Guys, Jaws 4 is, I guess the shark has become psychic and knows where the Brody family is. So all the Brodys, it's ridiculous. Ellen Brody is the only one left alive. And so she, the shark attacks on Amity, like Martha's Vineyard. And she's like, I'm going to move to Florida to escape this shark that keeps attacking my family. And then the shark apparently knows that she's in Florida, swims down to Florida, and attacks her. It's just amazing. Michael Caine, by the way, is in this movie. Great Michael Caine. He was in a movie that year called Hannah and Her Sisters and won the Best Supporting Actor that year. And he couldn't accept it because he was filming Jaws: The Revenge. And later on, people are like, are you sad that you weren't there to collect your Oscar? And he's like, no, I bought my mother a house with the money I got from that Jaws movie. It's fine. I love Michael Caine. Something that happened much later, this is sort of recent, a Broadway show, well, it was a show in England, a stage show in England called The Shark is Broken, created by Ian Shaw, Robert Shaw's son, about the making of Jaws. And it was on screen. So the whole set was the Orca. And it was all about the arguments between Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss, and all the stuff that happens. They recreated this, which I kind of thought was interesting. So he looks just like his dad. And so the whole thing is, examining his father's alcoholism and the big fight and all this stuff. And Roy Scheider's just sitting in the background being cool the whole time. It's called The Shark is Broken. Richard Dreyfuss, longtime meanie Richard Dreyfuss, saw the play and hated it. He's like, that's not what we did. That's not how anything happened. That's how they portrayed him. So I can't really be mad at him because that's how they portrayed him. He's like a whiny jerk in the play, and in real life. And that's him talking to his old co-star son. So that's cool. So now we're here. 50th anniversary of Jaws. What's happening now? Well, we've got the 50th anniversary Blu-rays, the action figures of Quint and Hooper, which is weird. And then all the toys are back. Jaws 50th everywhere. Parodies have happened over the years. This is from Airplane. I don't have a slide for this, but you remember Land Shark from Saturday Night Live? Land Shark. All these parodies. Finding Nemo. That shark's name is Bruce because of the mechanical shark. It's really neat. And Shark Week is such a big thing. Shark Week has only happened because of Jaws. And then this movie that came out this year called Dangerous Animals. It's a serial killer who lures people onto his boat and feeds them to sharks. It's okay. It's horror. But so what does Peter Benchley think of all this? Well, people have said, do you regret this movie? Because sharks then became very hunted. Yeah. So he didn't, so he's been interviewed several times. He's like, no, I love Jaws. I love what happened, but I don't love what happened because of Jaws. So he became a shark conservationist. And, for in the last few years of his life, he saved like thousands of sharks. He like spread the word that they weren't actually that dangerous. He was great. Frank Mundus, actually, the guy who captured that great white shark that I mentioned at the very beginning, he also did this. So this is the whole thing where people make their names killing sharks and then become shark conservationists. And then Steven Spielberg. So Steven Spielberg, we got that. Steven Spielberg, I think we know about his career after this. Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., what else did he do? Jurassic Park, War of the Worlds. He has just become one of the biggest, directors of all time, and invented this whole idea of bringing thriller elements and a genre film into the art sense and making it a bigger thing, and invented the summer blockbuster in its stead. So, thank you very much. That is Jaws. So do we have any questions about Jaws that I can hopefully answer? Yes?
Have you gone to Martha's Vineyard to see the exhibit that they have over there?
I haven't yet. I don't drive, so it's hard for me to get to Martha's Vineyard or jet ski. So, but I really want to see that, because they have like a full replica of Jaws there, and it's really neat. Yeah. Yeah, I should take the ferry over. Like, go down to Quincy.
From Boston to Hyannis and take the ferry.
Okay. Know what I'm doing tomorrow. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming to Jaws. If you have any questions, I'm going to be hanging around here for a little while. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much.